The Great Hall of Viridian Prime buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for what many considered the most important council meeting in centuries. The massive chamber stretched upward into shadows, its crystal walls reflecting the bioluminescent patterns of dozens of different species. At the center sat the circular table, where decisions that affected trillions of lives were made. Hyun-woo adjusted his simple black suit and checked his datapad. One final time, the human diplomat looked remarkably calm, considering he was about to face accusations from nearly every major species in the galaxy. His dark eyes moved across the assembled delegates with quiet interest, as if he were attending a lecture rather than a trial. Beside him, Jin-A organized her research files, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency across holographic displays showing alien psychological profiles. The Velkari representative stood first, his massive frame casting long shadows across the table. The reptilian warrior diplomat had conquered more worlds than any other living being, yet his voice carried an unusual tension as he spoke. "We gather today because of a problem that grows larger with each passing cycle," he announced, his scaled hands gripping the podium. "The humans have expanded into 47 star systems in the past 50 standard years, yet they have not declared war on a single species." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The crystalline collective's speaker chimed with harmonic frequencies that translated as confusion. "How is expansion without conquest a problem?" they asked. "Is this not the preferred method of growth?" The Velkari delegate's eyes fixed on Hyun-woo, who continued taking notes with an expression of polite interest. "Because no one knows how they do it," the warrior replied. "Ships arrive in systems we thought were heavily defended. Colonies appear on worlds we believed were impossible to settle. Trade routes open through space that should be controlled by other powers. Yet there are no battles, no negotiations, no formal agreements. They simply exist where they were not before." Jin-A looked up from her files and smiled pleasantly at the assembled delegates. Her expression was friendly, almost motherly, which somehow made several representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. She raised her hand slightly, a gesture that immediately drew attention despite its simplicity. "If I may address the concerns," she said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. "Humanity has always been transparent about our methods. We explore, we study, we adapt, and we settle where conditions are suitable. We follow all galactic protocols for expansion and have never violated another species' territorial claims." The Cronin ambassador, a being of living metal and circuits, processed this statement for several microseconds before responding. "Your statement contains factual accuracies, yet fails to address the core concern they transmitted. 3 major civilizations have attempted to halt human expansion through military intervention. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 800 systems and possessed the most advanced fleet in known space. They engaged human forces at the Battle of Kepler Station 23 years ago. Today, no Zephyrian worlds exist." Hyun-woo finally looked up from his notes, his expression shifting to one of mild concern. "That is indeed unfortunate," he said softly. "The loss of any civilization is a tragedy. However, I should point out that the Zephyrians declared war on humanity first. They attacked our civilian transport vessels and issued ultimatums demanding, we abandoned 17 colony worlds. We tried diplomatic solutions for months before any military action became necessary." "Necessary," echoed the Vorthak representative, their tentacled form writhing with agitation. "The Zephyrians possessed technology that could crack planetary surfaces from orbit. Their battle cruisers were the size of moons. How does a species that had only been in space for 300 years completely eliminate such a force?" The human diplomat's smile never wavered. "I am not qualified to discuss military tactics," he replied. "Perhaps Captain Kang-ho could better answer such questions when he arrives." Several delegates exchanged glances at this casual mention of a human military officer. The fact that humans had apparently arranged for their own security detail to attend a diplomatic meeting was not lost on anyone present. The ethereal Dominion speaker floated forward. their gaseous form shifting through several colors before settling on a deep purple that indicated serious concern. The pattern repeats, they whispered in harmonics that bypassed universal translators and spoke directly to consciousness. The Mordak hegemony attempted to claim human colonies as tribute worlds. They possessed psychic abilities that could dominate most sentient minds. The entire hegemony vanished within 6 months of first contact with human forces. The Ravager swarm sought to consume human biomass, added the insectoid collective representative, their mandibles clicking with nervous energy. Trillions of creatures bred for warfare and consumption, capable of stripping entire worlds bare in days. They encountered human colonies in the Outer Rim territories 50 years ago. No Ravager has been seen since. Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully as he made another note. Again, tragic losses of life, he said. Humanity has always preferred peaceful coexistence, but we do reserve the right to defend ourselves when attacked. I believe this is a standard practice among most civilized species. Jin'e began organizing her files into neat stacks, each movement precise and purposeful. If I may suggest, she said without looking up from her work, perhaps the concern stems from incomplete information rather than actual threat. Our Xenobiological Research Division has compiled extensive studies on interspecies relations and conflict resolution. We would be happy to share our findings with anyone interested in better understanding human behavioral patterns. The offer sent another wave of unease through the assembly. Several species had encountered human researchers, in recent decades always polite scholars asking questions about culture, biology, and history. Only now were they beginning to realize the scope of what had been studied. The Aquatic Federation's representative spoke through translation equipment that converted their sonar communications into standard galactic speech. Human research vessels have visited our deepest ocean worlds, they reported. They requested permission to study our cities, our migration patterns, our reproductive cycles, our defense systems. We granted access because they seemed genuinely interested in learning. They asked very detailed questions about our pressure, resistance, our communication networks, our resource distribution methods. Similar experiences across multiple species confirmed the silicon-based collective. Human scholars have documented our mineral consumption rates, our expansion algorithms, our population growth equations. They claim to be conducting academic research on galactic biodiversity. The Velkari delegate's scales darkened with realization. They have been mapping us, he said slowly. Every strength, every weakness, every capability. They know more about us than we know about them. Hyunwoo's expression remained pleasant and interested throughout these revelations. When the accusations ended, he stood slowly and activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The projection showed a complex web of connections linking every species present, with detailed statistics on military capabilities, economic structures, territorial holdings, and technological developments. Guilty as charged, he said with a slight smile. Humanity has indeed spent considerable resources studying our galactic neighbors. We believe that understanding is the foundation of peaceful coexistence. Knowledge prevents misunderstandings that might lead to unnecessary conflicts. The display shifted to show historical data on every major interspecies war over the past 1,000 years. Each conflict was analyzed in terms of miscommunication, cultural, misunderstanding, or failure to appreciate differences in thinking patterns. What concerns me, Hyunwoo continued, is that several species seem to view knowledge itself as threatening. Understanding another culture's strengths and weaknesses should make cooperation easier, not more difficult, unless, of course, there were plans to exploit those weaknesses. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Every species present had indeed been studied by humans, and every species present had also considered humanity a potential target for conquest or exploitation at some point in recent history. Jin'e stood and activated additional displays, showing human settlements across known space. Each colony was marked with detailed information about local conditions, native species interactions, and integration success rates. Humanity has successfully established peaceful relationships with over 300 different species, she noted. We currently maintain active trade agreements with 70% of known civilizations, and have never initiated hostilities against any peaceful neighbor. The pattern that seems to concern everyone is quite simple, Hyunwoo concluded. Species that attempt to attack, dominate, or consume humanity tend to cease existing. Species that engage with us peacefully find us to be reliable partners and steadfast allies. The choice of which pattern to follow has always belonged to others. The Galactic Council chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems and the occasional translation static. Every representative present understood that they had gathered to discuss the human problem, but the Krillian dreadnought Bone Crusher hung in space like a mountain of metal and death, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could reduce planets to cosmic dust. Admiral Thexvar stood on the command bridge, his massive claws gripping the railing as he watched the small human trading vessel approach through the viewscreen. The tiny ship looked like an insect approaching a sleeping dragon, fragile and insignificant against the backdrop of the most powerful military force in known space. "Sir, the human vessel is requesting permission to pass through our patrol zone," reported the communications officer, her voice carrying the natural growl of the Krillian species. "They claim to be carrying standard trade goods between the neutral zones." Thexvar's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the approaching ship. Humans had been traveling through Krillian space with increasing frequency over the past few years, always polite, always following proper protocols, always completely unafraid of the massive warships that could vaporize them without effort. This lack of proper fear had begun to irritate the Admiral considerably. "Bring them aboard for standard inspection," he commanded, his deep voice echoing through the bridge. "It is time these soft creatures learned to show proper respect for superior forces." The human ship docked with mechanical precision, its small airlock connecting seamlessly with the dreadnought's massive docking bay. Thexvar made his way to the inspection chamber, accompanied by a full squad of Krillian warriors whose natural size and predatory appearance had intimidated countless species over the centuries. Their homeworld's heavy gravity had produced beings of incredible strength and reflexes, and their culture had refined these gifts into military excellence that dominated entire sectors of space. Sunho stepped through the airlock with a warm smile, followed by his engineer Dayun and a passenger, who introduced himself as Tai Min. The three humans appeared completely relaxed despite being surrounded by towering alien warriors whose claws could tear through steel plating. Sunho bowed politely in the manner of human diplomatic customs, a gesture that somehow seemed more confident than submissive. "Admiral Thexvar," Sunho said in perfectly accented Krillian, "it is an honor to meet the famous victor of the Siege of Antares. Your tactical innovations during that campaign are studied in military academies across the galaxy." The Admiral's surprise at hearing his native language spoken so fluently was quickly replaced by suspicion. "How does a human trader know of military academies?" he growled. "Such information is not common knowledge among civilians." Daun looked up from the scanner readings she was examining on a small device, her expression brightening with genuine interest. "Oh, military history is a popular hobby among human engineers," she explained cheerfully. "We love studying how different species solve complex problems under pressure. The way you modified your ship configurations to account for gravitational variables during the Antares campaign was absolutely brilliant." Taemin nodded enthusiastically, pulling out a datapad covered with detailed notes. "I am actually working on my thesis about comparative military strategies across different galactic civilizations," he said. "The Krillian approach to fleet coordination is particularly fascinating because you have managed to maintain tactical flexibility despite operating such massive vessels." Admiral Thexvar felt an uncomfortable sensation that he had never experienced in decades of military service. These humans were not showing fear or even healthy respect for his power. Instead, they seemed genuinely excited to meet him, as if he were some kind of research subject rather than a deadly predator. "What exactly is your thesis about, young human?" he asked, his tone becoming more cautious than threatening. Taimin's eyes lit up with scholarly enthusiasm. "I am comparing how different species adapt their natural advantages to space warfare," he explained. "For example, Krillians evolved as apex predators on a high-gravity world, So your ships emphasize raw power and direct assault tactics. Your KOF armor plating is designed to absorb massive impacts. Your weapons prioritize devastating single strikes. And your formation strategies rely on overwhelming force applied at decisive points. The human continued talking while casually noting details about the dreadnought's internal structure, crew positions, and equipment specifications. What I find most interesting is how you have maintained your hunter pack mentality, even in void combat. Your command structures still reflect the alpha-dominated hierarchies of your ancestral hunting groups, which gives you incredible unit cohesion, but also creates predictable response patterns to certain types of threats. Da Yun had moved to examine the docking bay's technical systems with professional interest. Your gravitational compensation systems are impressive, she commented to one of the Krillian engineers. We have been working on similar modifications for human vessels operating in high-gravity environments. The power requirements must be enormous. For ships this size. Trade secrets, the Krillian engineer replied automatically, but his tone lacked conviction. Something about the human woman's casual technical knowledge made him uncomfortable. Of course, Da-Un agreed pleasantly, though I notice you are using what appears to be a modified version of the field generators we developed for the colonies around Proxima 7. The adaptation for military applications is quite clever, though I imagine the energy inefficiency becomes problematic during extended campaigns. The Krillian engineer stared at her in shock. The technology she was describing had been classified at the highest levels of military security. No outsider should have known about its existence, let alone its operational limitations. Sun Ho had begun discussing trade routes with Admiral Thexvar, his manner friendly and professional. We have been establishing regular shipping lanes through this sector for the past 2 years, he explained. Human colonies in the Outer Rim have been producing some excellent agricultural products that should appeal to Krillian nutritional requirements. Our biological research suggests that your species would particularly benefit from the protein complexes we have developed. Your biological research, Thexvar repeated slowly. What exactly have humans been researching about Krillian biology? Oh, standard xenobiological studies, Sun Ho replied with an innocent smile. Population genetics, nutritional requirements, environmental adaptations, reproductive cycles, lifespan, projections, psychological profiles, social structures. The usual academic curiosity about our galactic neighbors. Tae-min looked up from his notes with sudden interest. Actually, Admiral, I would love to ask you some questions about Krillian. Military psychology if you have time. Our researchers have developed some interesting theories about how your species' natural pack-hunting instincts translate into modern combat scenarios. What kind of theories? The Admiral asked, though he was beginning to suspect he did not want to know the answer. Well, for instance, Krillian battle formations consistently favor encirclement tactics that mirror the hunting patterns your ancestors used to bring down large prey on your homeworld. Tae-min explained enthusiastically. Your fleet movements show clear preference for separating enemy forces and eliminating the weakest targets first, which is exactly what we would expect from evolved pack hunters. This information is classified, growled one of the Krillian officers. Not really. Da Yun called from across the docking bay where she had been examining power conduits. Anyone with basic knowledge of evolutionary psychology and access to historical battle records could predict these patterns. What is interesting is how consistent the patterns remain despite technological advances. Your species seems to have difficulty adapting traditional tactics to unconventional threats. The temperature in the docking bay seemed to drop several degrees as the implications of her statement sank in. Admiral Thexvar realized that these apparently harmless humans had been systematically analyzing every aspect of Krillian military doctrine, biological limitations, and strategic thinking patterns. You have been studying us as potential enemies, he accused. Sun Ho looked genuinely surprised by the suggestion. Not at all, Admiral. We study everyone as potential friends. Understanding leads to better cooperation and fewer misunderstandings. For instance, knowing that Krillians value direct confrontation and respect strength helps us interact more effectively with your people. Besides, Tae-min added with scholarly excitement, Studying successful military organizations like yours helps us understand what makes different species effective in their chosen roles. The Krillian military machine is one of the most impressive examples of evolutionary advantages being successfully adapted to modern technology. Yun rejoined the group, having apparently completed her examination of the dreadnought's technical systems. Your ship is remarkable, she told the Admiral with genuine admiration. The engineering solutions you have developed for coordinating vessels of this size are truly impressive, though I did notice some interesting vulnerability patterns in your power distribution network's vulnerabilities. Thexvar's voice carried a dangerous edge. Oh, nothing intentional, Yun assured him quickly. Just the natural trade-offs that come with prioritizing maximum firepower over defensive redundancy. Every design has limitations, and understanding them helps us appreciate the genius of the overall concept. The dead world of Nexus Prime turned slowly in the light of its dying star, its surface covered with empty cities that stretched beyond the horizon in perfect geometric patterns. Boram stood at the observation deck of the research vessel, looking glass, watching the planet grow larger as they approached orbit. The Nexari homeworld had once been the crown jewel of the most powerful psychic civilization in galactic history, but now it held nothing but silence and abandoned monuments to a species that had simply stopped existing. Preliminary scans show no life signs anywhere on the surface, reported Wu Jin from his position at the sensor station. The military historian had volunteered for this expedition specifically to study what had happened to the Nexari hegemony, one of the most mysterious disappearances in recent galactic history. Atmospheric composition is stable, infrastructure appears intact, but there are no energy signatures indicating active technology. Captain Young-Soo moved between the various research stations with practiced efficiency, coordinating the scientific teams that would soon be exploring the empty cities below. His special forces background had taught him to notice details that others might miss. And something about this world made his instincts whisper warnings about dangers that might not be immediately obvious. The Nexari possessed psychic abilities that could dominate the minds of entire populations, Boram said as she reviewed the historical data on her portable display. Their civilization spanned 12 star systems and included subject species from dozens of different worlds. They controlled one of the largest territories in known space through mental manipulation rather than military force. The archaeological team prepared their equipment for the descent to the planet's surface. Unlike most extinct civilizations, the Nexari had left behind no evidence of warfare, natural disasters, or economic collapse. Their cities simply stood empty one day, as if the entire species had decided to walk away from everything they had built and never return. What we know is limited, Wu Jin explained as they boarded the shuttle for planetary descent. 43 years ago, the Nexari encountered human colonial expeditions in the Vega sector. Initial contact reports suggested normal diplomatic procedures were followed. 6 months later, every Nexari world had gone silent. No distress calls, no military engagements, no request for assistance. They just stopped responding to all communication. The shuttle touched down in the central plaza of what had once been the Nexari capital city. Massive crystalline structures rose around them like frozen thoughts, their surfaces still gleaming despite decades of abandonment. The architecture seemed to pulse with residual psychic energy, creating patterns that were almost hypnotic to observe directly. Boram set up her scanning equipment at the base of the largest structure, a towering spire that had served as the central node of Nexari mental networks. Her instruments detected faint traces of the exotic energy signatures associated with psychic activity, but the patterns were unlike anything in the scientific literature. The psychic resonance here is all wrong, she reported to the team. Normal Nexari mental energy creates harmonic frequencies that enhance telepathic communication. What I am reading looks more like interference patterns, as if something was disrupting their natural abilities. Young-Soo established a defensive perimeter around the research site while keeping one eye on the empty streets that stretched in all directions. The complete absence of any life forms was more unsettling than obvious dangers would have been. Even abandoned worlds usually showed signs of scavenger activity or natural reclamation, but Nexus Prime remained exactly as its inhabitants had left it. Wu Jin discovered the first major clue when he accessed the Nexari Central Archives using translation protocols developed by human xenolinguists. The final entries in their historical records painted a picture of confident expansion, followed by sudden terror and confusion. "Listen to this," he called to the others. "This is from the Nexari High Council's final session, recorded 43 years ago. The translation is rough, but the meaning is clear. The humans resist our influence in ways we have never encountered. Their minds are not merely strong or disciplined, they are chaos itself, impossible to read or control. Worse, contact with human consciousness seems to disrupt our own abilities." Boram looked up from her equipment with growing excitement. "That matches what my scanners are showing. The psychic residue here contains patterns that look like feedback loops, as if the Nexari mental networks began interfering with themselves." The team moved deeper into the city, following the archaeological trail toward the Nexari's primary research facilities. Each building they entered told the same story of sudden abandonment, but the research centers contained additional evidence of what had transpired during humanity's first encounter with the galaxy's most powerful psychic species. In the main laboratory complex, Wu Jin found detailed studies of human brain patterns that the Nexari had apparently conducted during their initial contact attempts. The alien scientists had expected to find the usual neural structures associated with sentient thought, but instead had discovered something that defied all their understanding of consciousness. According to these records, human minds do not function according to any recognizable psychic principles, he reported. The Nexari describe human consciousness as storms of contradictory thoughts held in impossible balance, and patterns that change even as they are observed. Boram discovered evidence of the Nexari's growing desperation in the experimental logs. "They tried everything to understand human mental processes," she said, reading from translated files. "Direct telepathic contact, psychic probes, consciousness mapping, even attempts to create artificial human-like neural networks. Nothing worked, and each failure seemed to make their own abilities weaker." The breakthrough came when Youngsu found the personal records of individual Nexari scientists who had participated in the human contact experiments. Their accounts painted a picture of mounting horror as they realized what exposure to human minds was doing to their species. This scientist describes attempting to read the thoughts of a human diplomat named Chung Wook, Youngsu reported. Instead of the ordered mental patterns they expected, the Nexari encountered what they describe as beautiful chaos that sang with infinite possibilities. The experience apparently left the scientist unable to use his psychic abilities for weeks. Additional records showed that the problem had spread throughout Nexari society like a contagion. Scientists who had studied human minds found their own telepathic powers diminishing. Telepathic networks began experiencing interference and breakdown. The mental unity that had held their civilization together started fragmenting as individual Nexari lost their connection to the collective consciousness. "The final entries are the most disturbing," Boram said as she reviewed the last historical records. The Nexari leadership realized that continued contact with humans would eventually destroy their psychic abilities entirely. But by then, the damage was already spreading through their population faster than they could contain it. The team found evidence of desperate attempts to quarantine affected individuals and restore damaged psychic networks, but every solution had failed. Human consciousness apparently acted like a virus in telepathic systems, creating cascade failures that could not be stopped or reversed. Here is the most revealing passage, Wu Jin announced from his position at the Central Archives. This is from the final message sent by the Nexari High Council before all communication ceased. We have learned too late that humans are not merely immune to psychic influence. They are antithetical to ordered thought itself. Their minds contain chaos so pure and creative that it unmakes the very concept of mental control. We cannot coexist with such beings without ceasing to be what we are. The implications of this discovery settled over the research team like a physical weight. The Nexari had not been destroyed by human weapons or military action. They had been unintentionally dissolved by simple contact with human consciousness. Their psychic abilities burned away by exposure to minds that operated according to completely Different principles. Boram's equipment detected massive psychic disturbances in the planetary crust itself, suggesting that the final collapse of Nexari mental networks had been catastrophic. The geological scans show evidence of psychic shockwaves that rippled through the entire world, she reported. When their collective consciousness finally collapsed, it created mental feedback that affected every living thing on the planet, Young-Soo found the ultimate proof of what had happened in the Nexari's final research facility. Inside a heavily shielded laboratory, human genetic samples and brain tissue had been stored for study. The containment systems were still active after decades, apparently automated to continue protecting the galaxy from the dangerous specimens within. They were terrified of us, he realized as he read the warning labels written in Nexari script. Not because we were powerful or aggressive, but because we represented something they could not understand or control. To a species built around psychic dominance, humans were the ultimate nightmare. We were immune to their greatest strength and toxic to their very existence. The neutral station Harmony Point drifted through the void between star systems, its massive structure designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of different species in complete neutrality. The station's rotating sections provided various gravity levels and atmospheric conditions, while its central core maintained the diplomatic chambers where the most important decisions in galactic politics were made. Today those chambers buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from across known space gathered for what many considered a last chance to address the growing human problem through peaceful means. Yoon-ji sat at the human delegation's assigned position, her hands folded calmly on the polished table surface as she listened to the opening statements from various species representatives. The chief diplomat had earned her reputation through decades of successfully negotiating complex agreements, but today, she faced a unique challenge. For the first time in her career, she was representing a species that other civilizations actively feared rather than simply disagreed with. Dong-hyun occupied the seat beside her, his role as interspecies psychologist making him invaluable for understanding the motivations and concerns of the various alien delegates. His quiet observations had already identified several species that were more frightened than angry, suggesting that fear rather than hostility was driving this confrontation. The Velkari ambassador stood first, his massive frame commanding immediate attention from the assembled delegates. We have gathered here because normal diplomatic channels have proven inadequate for addressing the situation that humanity represents, he announced, his scaled hands gripping the podium with barely controlled tension. In the past 50 years, 3 major civilizations have ceased to exist after encountering human forces. Dozens of species report increasing anxiety about human expansion into previously neutral territories. The time has come for direct action, murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber from representatives of over 30 different species. The crystalline collective chimed their support through harmonic frequencies, while the silicon-based Federation transmitted approval through quantum entanglement signals that bypassed conventional communication entirely. The Aquatic Federation's delegate spoke next, their translation equipment converting sonar patterns into standard galactic speech. Humanity has demonstrated capabilities that exceed known technological and military parameters, they reported. Human vessels appear in secured systems without triggering detection networks. Human colonies establish themselves on worlds that should be uninhabitable by their species. Human researchers gather classified information about other civilizations with disturbing efficiency. Yoon-ji made careful notes as each species presented their concerns, her expression remaining pleasantly interested despite the mounting accusations. She had expected this confrontation for months, ever since intelligence reports began indicating that various species were coordinating their responses to human expansion. The insectoid collective's representative clicked mandibles in agitation as they delivered their prepared statement. The pattern is consistent across all encounters. Species that attempt to restrict human activities through military intervention cease to exist within months. Species that attempt to negotiate from positions of strength find themselves at severe disadvantages within years. Species that ignore humans entirely discover that humans have been studying them without consent or notification. We propose immediate restrictions on human expansion beyond currently occupied territories, declared the ethereal Dominion speaker, their gaseous form. shifting through colors that indicated serious determination. We further propose mandatory oversight of human research activities and full disclosure of human military capabilities. These measures are necessary to prevent further destabilization of galactic civilization. Captain Il-sung's voice came through the chamber's communication system as the human security escort requested permission to dock. His arrival had been scheduled to coincide with the formal presentations, though several delegates seemed surprised that humans had arranged for military representation at what was supposed to be a purely diplomatic meeting. The demands are reasonable, on the surface, Yunji said when called upon to respond to the various proposals. Humanity has always supported transparency and cooperation in galactic affairs. However, I believe there may be some misunderstandings about our intentions and methods that we should address before implementing new restrictions. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with detailed information about human activities across known space. The projection showed colony worlds, trade routes, research expeditions, and diplomatic contacts organized by star system and time period. As you can see, human expansion has followed predictable patterns based on resource availability, strategic location, and compatibility with our environmental requirements, she explained. Every colony has been established in accordance with galactic protocols for territorial claims. Every research project has been conducted with proper notifications to relevant authorities. Every trade agreement has been negotiated through standard diplomatic channels. The display shifted to show detailed analyses of each species' concerns about human activities, economic data, military assessments, technological evaluations, and cultural studies were organized into comprehensive reports that demonstrated the scope of human knowledge about galactic civilizations. What seems to disturb our neighbors is not that we have violated any laws or agreements, but that we have been thorough in our approach to interspecies relations, Yunji continued. Yes, we study other civilizations extensively. Yes, we prepare contingency plans for various scenarios. Yes, we maintain military forces capable of defending human interests. These activities are standard practices for any responsible government. Donghyun stood and addressed the psychological aspects of the growing tensions. What I find interesting is that most of the concerns raised today stem from fear of the unknown, rather than anger about specific human actions, he observed. Species are uncomfortable because they do not understand how humans accomplish certain tasks, or why we seem immune to conventional forms of pressure or intimidation. The human psychologist activated additional displays showing comparative analyses of different species' decision-making processes, threat assessment protocols, and conflict resolution strategies. Each civilization's approach to problems was mapped in detail, revealing patterns that had taken human researchers decades to identify and understand. The fundamental issue appears to be a difference in basic philosophy, Donghyun explained. Most species approach challenges by applying greater force, superior technology, or more efficient organization. Humans approach challenges by studying them until we understand them completely, then adapting our methods to exploit whatever opportunities we discover. Captain Il-sung entered the chamber with a small security detail, their presence immediately noticed by every delegate present. The human military officer moved with quiet confidence through the assembly, nodding politely to various representatives before taking his assigned position near the human delegation. Captain Il-sung commands the human fleet currently stationed in this sector, Yunji announced casually. Perhaps he could address some of the military concerns that have been raised. Il-sung stood and activated tactical displays, showing the positions of human vessels throughout the region surrounding Harmony Point. The projection revealed dozens of ships that had apparently been present during the entire diplomatic session, their positions carefully chosen to monitor all approaches to the neutral station. Human military doctrine emphasizes preparation and situational awareness, he explained, in response to the shocked expressions from several delegates. We have maintained standard security protocols for this diplomatic meeting, which includes positioning appropriate forces to respond to any potential threats or emergencies. The tactical display expanded to show human fleet positions across multiple star systems, revealing a network of vessels that provided coverage for virtually every major trade route and political center in known space. The scale of human military deployment far exceeded what any species had previously estimated. "We are not an aggressive species," Il-sung continued, "but we are a cautious one. Human colonies, trade vessels, and diplomatic missions operate under constant protection from forces that most species never detect. We have learned that preparation prevents problems more effectively than reactions after problems occur." The chamber fell silent as delegates processed the implications of what they had just learned. Humanity had not only been studying every major civilization in the galaxy, but had also been quietly positioning military assets to respond to virtually any scenario that might develop. The species they had gathered to restrict was already prepared for their restrictions. "I believe we may have approached this situation incorrectly," Yunji said into the silence. "You have presented demands based on the assumption that humanity poses a threat to galactic stability. However, our research suggests that we have actually been contributing to galactic stability by preventing conflicts that might otherwise have occurred." The holographic displays shifted to show analyses of potential conflict scenarios between various species. The Global Command Center, buried deep beneath the mountains of Tibet, hummed with quiet activity as Earth's most important decisions were made in chambers that most of humanity would never see. Banks of quantum computers processed information from across the galaxy, while holographic displays showed the current positions of human fleets, colonies, and research expeditions scattered throughout known space. At the center of this technological maze, 3 individuals met regularly to discuss humanity's role in an increasingly complex galactic community. Ji-hoon stood before the main strategic display, his hands clasped behind his back as he reviewed reports from the diplomatic meeting at Harmony Point. As director of Earth's Interspecies Strategy Division, he had spent decades analyzing the behavior patterns of alien civilizations and developing policies that would ensure humanity's continued survival and prosperity. The latest intelligence suggested that other species were finally beginning to understand what they were dealing with, though not necessarily in the way anyone had expected. "The psychological profiles from Harmony Point are fascinating," reported So Young from her position at the Research Coordination Station. The head of the Human Adaptation Project had access to more classified information about alien species than any other person in human space, and her insights had proven crucial for understanding why humanity seemed to terrify other civilizations despite never actually threatening them. Most delegates showed decreased stress indicators by the end of the session, suggesting that knowledge reduced their fear levels rather than increasing them. Admiral Kyung-min entered the command center carrying the latest reports from human fleets positioned throughout the galaxy. His role as commander of Earth's Deep Space Fleet gave him unique perspective on how other species reacted to human military capabilities, and his assessments had helped shape humanity's approach to interspecies relations for the past 20 years. Fleet commanders report that several species have begun actively avoiding human patrol routes, he announced as he joined the other 2 at the central planning table. The Krillians have withdrawn their forces from 3 sectors where human trade vessels operate regularly. The Aquatic Federation has canceled scheduled military exercises in regions with human colonies. Even the Silicon-based collective has altered their expansion patterns to avoid potential contact with human settlements. Ji-hoon activated detailed analysis programs that processed the incoming data and compared it to historical patterns of interspecies behavior. "The avoidance behavior is accelerating," he observed. "Species that might have considered military action against human interests 6 months ago are now going to considerable effort to prevent any situations that might lead to conflict." So Young pulled up comparative studies of human versus alien decision-making processes that had been compiled over decades of careful observation and interaction. "I think we have been approaching this from the wrong perspective," she said as she reviewed the psychological data. "We have been trying to understand why other species fear us, but the more important question might be why they should not fear us." The 3 leaders gathered around a holographic representation of human space that showed the true scope of humanity's expansion over the past 2 centuries. Colonies, research stations, trading posts, and military installations formed a network that extended far beyond what most alien civilizations realized. Each human settlement was connected to others through communication networks, supply chains, and mutual defense agreements that created a web of interdependence spanning dozens of star systems. The aliens are not wrong to be cautious, Admiral Kyung-min pointed out as he highlighted human military positions throughout the galaxy. We have been quietly building the most extensive intelligence network in known space. Our researchers have compiled detailed profiles of every major species, including their biological weaknesses, psychological vulnerabilities, technological limitations, and strategic blind spots. Ji-hoon nodded as he accessed files containing humanity's comprehensive assessments of galactic civilizations. The Velkari Empire believes they have the most powerful military in the galaxy, but our analysis shows 17 different ways to neutralize their advantages using technology they do not know we possess. The Krillians think their size and strength make them unbeatable in direct combat, but we have developed tactics specifically designed to exploit their pack-hunting instincts against them. The Nexari thought they could dominate us mentally. So Young added, but contact with human consciousness literally drove their species extinct because our minds operate according to principles that their psychic abilities could not process or control. We did not even realize we were destroying them until it was too late. The command center's main display shifted to show statistical analyses of human versus alien conflict outcomes over the past 50 years. Every species that had attempted military action against human interests had either been completely destroyed or had suffered such devastating losses that they had immediately sued for peace. More importantly, none of these conflicts had been initiated by humanity. We have never started a war, Admiral Kyung-min emphasized as he reviewed the historical data. Every military engagement has been defensive in nature, responding to attacks or ultimatums from species that assumed they could intimidate or conquer human settlements. The problem is that our defensive capabilities are so effective that they eliminate threats completely, rather than simply repelling them. So Young accessed psychological profiles of various alien species to illustrate humanity's fundamental difference from other galactic civilizations. Most species think in terms of predictable responses to specific stimuli, she explained. If you threaten them with superior force, they submit or retreat. If you offer them beneficial trade agreements, they cooperate. If you demonstrate technological advantages, they attempt to acquire similar capabilities through research or negotiation. Humans do not follow these patterns, Ji-hoon continued. When threatened with superior force, we study our enemies until we understand their weaknesses, then develop innovative countermeasures that neutralize their advantages. When offered beneficial agreements, we analyze the long-term implications and prepare for scenarios where those agreements might be violated. When we encounter superior technology, we do not try to copy it. We try to understand the principles behind it so we can develop something better. The three leaders reviewed humanity's approach to galactic expansion, which had confused and frightened other species, precisely because it did not match any recognizable pattern of imperial growth or territorial conquest. Human colonies appeared in systems that other species had dismissed as worthless or impossible to settle. Human trade routes connected previously isolated regions of space through innovations that made interstellar commerce profitable on scales that had never been achieved before. We adapt, So Young said simply. That is what makes us dangerous to species that rely on predictable responses to control their environments. We do not submit to superior force. We do not accept limitations based on technological constraints, and we do not stop expanding just because other species find our growth patterns uncomfortable. Admiral Kyung-min highlighted recent intelligence, reports showing how various alien civilizations were responding to humanity's continued expansion. The galaxy is essentially reorganizing itself around us, he observed. Species are modifying their territorial claims, trade agreements, military deployments, and research priorities based on predictions about human behavior. We have become the primary factor that other civilizations consider when making long-term strategic decisions. Ji-hoon accessed classified files containing humanity's most sensitive assessments of galactic political stability. The irony is that our presence has actually reduced conflicts between other species, he noted. When everyone is focused on understanding and responding to humans, They have less time and resources to fight each other over traditional territorial disputes or resource competition. The analysis revealed that humanity had unintentionally become the galaxy's stabilizing force, not through military intimidation or diplomatic pressure, but simply by being unpredictable enough that other species preferred to avoid conflicts that might draw human attention or intervention. We are not conquerors in any traditional sense, So Young observed. We do not seek to dominate other species or control their development, but we are apex adapters in a galaxy full of species that rely on stable, predictable relationships to maintain their civilizations. Our very existence forces them to constantly reevaluate their assumptions about how the universe works. The command center's displays showed real-time intelligence from across human space, revealing the true scope of humanity's information-gathering capabilities. Every major alien civilization was being continuously monitored through networks of researchers, traders, diplomats, and tourists who collected data on everything from military deployments to cultural trends to individual psychology profiles of important leaders. The other species are right to consider us untouchable, Admiral Kyung-min concluded, not because we are invincible or because we possess superior technology,